Hello and welcome. My name is Katherine and I'll be your procurement guide. I have worked procurement and supply chain for the last 30 years, the last 25 of which have been in the Canadian public sector. I have written hundreds of RFPs and each process has taught me something new and I'd like to share that with you. In the last video, I went over 7 questions that you want to ask your end users or subject matter experts before drafting your RFP. In this video, I'm going to go over why you want to build your evaluation booklet with them at the same time in order to get the best outcome in your process. Better quality, better time savings. So we went through a previous video where we kind of outlined all the various RFX types of solicitations and just briefly mentioned like the request for proposals is where you want a solution to a problem and you are evaluating more than just price. It has other factors like corporate capabilities, experience of the team, their approach, their methodology, etc., etc. So the evaluation booklet that falls out of your RFP process has to map to the RFP. And I'll get into how to build an evaluation booklet in a future video. But right now, I would say the best time to draft your evaluation booklet is at the same time as drafting your RFP, because the evaluation booklet is the open, fair, transparent criteria that you've posted in your RFP. So, number 1, the benefits. Consistency and fairness, the efficiency in the evaluation, transparency, of course, and improved RFP, partly because you will ensure that what you want to evaluate is reflected in your RFP. And that is one of the most common issues I see where people are trying to save time. They'll post their RFP and then build their evaluation booklet while the RFP is on the street, thinking, you know what, I can use this time to draft the evaluation booklet. The problem with doing that is as you're drafting your evaluation booklet, you're going to realize there's criteria people are putting in there, and not like if someone inexperienced is drafting it, they may not catch it, but an experienced procurement professional will. You start building the criteria of what's a good, better, best response to your criteria. And you may have a hidden criteria in that you did not reflect the preference in your RFP. And one of those things is like types of tools. And I've mentioned in a previous video where somebody said the limitations, they absolutely could not have cloud storage. But if you didn't tell the vendors that, they won't know and they'll respond and you can't disqualify them. But at the same time, as if you put into your RFP that you prefer cloud storage, and for lack of a better example off the top of my head, you can't penalize people for not offering it because you didn't tell them that you had that preference. So that is one of the key parts of doing the evaluation booklet at the same time. And for consistency and fairness, you want to ensure that, all proposals are evaluated using the same criteria. The big thing, and I'll get into this later, in Canada, the law is that, it has to be open, fair, transparent. And one of those guidelines is that you can only evaluate their proposal against the criteria you issued. You don't get to compare proposals to one another because that's unfair and it's not transparent. Transparency is you asked for this criteria, you're evaluating their proposal against that criteria. So building the evaluation booklet at the same time means you're ensuring that consistency and fairness. It also reduces the bias and ensures objectivity because you're drafting criteria, an evaluation scorebook against what you wanted, as opposed to the comparison, which you want to ensure people aren't doing, because you're going to help your evaluators with those guardrails and guidelines. And you have to do it before the proposals close to eliminate the perception of bias that you read the proposals, then built the evaluation booklet. So that's why, again, people think they're saving time by building it while the RFP is on the street, but I would say build it at the same time. Then if you have questions from the vendor marketplace that adjust the criteria, you're amending the RFP and the evaluation booklet at the same time. So efficiency evaluation. So building it at the same time streamlines your evaluation process, because your evaluators are going to understand the criteria and what went into the RFP long before they have to look at proposals. And I recommend that when you're drafting your RFP, you have your evaluation committee involved so that they understand the RFP criteria. There's nothing worse than bringing in somebody to evaluate and they have no idea why you wrote the criteria the way you did. And it's probably because of conversations and questions from vendors and that type of thing. And I do find evaluators very rarely read the RFP. And they need to know what was in the RFP in order to actually fairly and objectively evaluate your proposals. So an additional tip to the efficiency is have those evaluation team members involved at that time so they understand the criteria, how you got to that criteria, and how they're going to evaluate it. I can give an example where I had a RFP process, very complex, multi-million dollars, and we had the evaluation team help build the evaluation booklet and the RFP criteria, and we actually put this spreadsheet into the RFP for vendors to fill out, made for a much more efficient RFP because they were filling out all the criteria and all the questions that we would then score instead of us hunting through a proposal. But I'll get into that in a future video. We had evaluators help build it. We had backup evaluators because, something may happen during the process that someone's not available. In one particular area, we had both the evaluator and their backup move on to another project that they were unavailable. And we had a brand new person come in to this major RFP. And I mean, it was huge. I believe we had about 80 questions, and a lot of them technical for the vendors to respond to. And there was one particular area where he was to be the subject matter expert. And when we got to evaluations, he was like, oh, well, this is unnecessary and this is unnecessary. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We asked for it in the RFP and this is why. And so his evaluation really bogged things down because he didn't understand why we asked the questions that we did and the criteria, because he was not involved from the start. And although he was given all the information in advance of the evaluation, he was busy with other things, didn't go through it, didn't ask questions. So he did his evaluations dismissing things he didn't think were relevant. So when we went to consensus, every single proposal had a variance because everybody else had scored within range for discussion. And his were, oh, I didn't think it was relevant. Okay, so we have to have a discussion and bring him up to speed so he understands the criteria, why we asked the questions we did, what we were looking for and why, and the backstory to how we got to where we were. That really bogged down the evaluation. So again, building your evaluation booklet at the same time as the RFP with the involvement of your evaluators will make for a much speedier evaluation. Transparency, and I kind of touched about that earlier. The transparency is that you're going to have your criteria of what you need. And if you go back to the 7 questions, you're going to have like the scope of work that then leads into your questions of what you ask of the vendors, which leads into your evaluation criteria. So if it aligns and maps, it's very clear to the vendors how they're being scored and what information is important to you, because they can see the mapping. And again, I will give more detail on how to map your statement of work to your requirements and the proposal to your scoring. But if you build the evaluation booklet at the same time as the RFP, you will make that transition much easier because you're going to start building the evaluation and probably write better questions for the response section that you want to see in proposals. Because how am I going to, a lot of times people will list their evaluation off the top, and I'll look at it and going, how are you going to evaluate that? What are you expecting to see in response to that? And then they'll start telling me, and I'm like, where in the RFP did you ask for that? So again, really helps with the transparency and efficiency. For the improved evaluation, like I said, it will make it more transparent and fair. You find the evaluators understand it, and it's going to go through more smoothly. But as I've alluded to, as you're building it, you may actually be putting your evaluation booklet right in your RFP. Now, granted, you're not putting all your scoring and weightings, but if you ask the vendors the questions and the type of response or what you're looking for, the vendors are going to give you a much better proposal because they know exactly what you want to see. And then you have this format of your evaluation already built. And then the proposals come in, and it's very easy to just take this response section, map it to your scoring table, and there you go. Much, much faster. Now, I will give a caveat. There are a number of vendors who have their own templates. And for whatever reason, they want to give you the marketing fluff. And for any vendors watching this, I will give you a video on how much the marketing fluff is useless to your proposals. But you may find some vendors submit without following your format, and then you're hunting for information. So it might be one of the criteria to put into your RFP that you want them to follow the format of the response section when they submit their proposal. Don't make it mandatory, because there have been cases where people have made their appendix without alteration a mandatory, but technically filling in the blanks is an alteration. So you have to be very careful of your wording if you make it a mandatory. So a lot of times we just find it, we make it a should follow the format, are highly encouraged to follow the format to ensure a better evaluation. So I hope this is helpful, that you understand the benefits of creating your evaluation booklet with your RFP to make for faster, better quality RFP process. In the next video, I plan to work on evaluation booklet building, on how to build your evaluation booklet based on what you've got in your RFP. Now, this works if you're going to do it while the RFP is on the street. It just means potentially you're going to have to amend your RFP if you realize you're missing something. But we'll take an RFP criteria, SOW, and build the RFP evaluation booklet, just to give a visual of how the process works. See you next time. Subscribe if you want to see that next video.